But I tell you what happens when I speak to people that have been in the same community at also the same time. You could just chat for bloody ever because it just sounds like you're in a crew room, doesn't it? Just ditting on. So we won't run for more than an hour, okay? Because that was your evening and my evening is good. Okay, welcome back to Fast Performance then. My name's Tim Davies, and as you can see, back in the attack shack, dropping truth bombs on your personal battlefields, helping you to win the wars you're fighting. And someone else who has won many wars is Paul Tremelling, actually, author of Harrier, How to Be a Fighter Pilot. It's a new book out now, the bestseller probably in many random places. And I want to bring him in now early just to talk about it because he's a great guy. I knew him briefly when I was in the service, and it's always great when I talk to someone from my past, as it were, because you'll find these talks can go on forever, and that's a bad thing. So we're going to limit to an hour, okay? Ask a few questions and see what's going on. So, Paul, welcome to the podcast. We'll record this. I'll put it out later, and then anything you want me to put in, as I said, let me know. Any kind of pictures you have, anything like that, I'll chuck them in, and we should be able to make this actually quite interesting for people. So you've got a book that you've written about your days full of dits, and you've probably left out quite a lot of detail, I would have thought.
Yeah, actually, Tim, thank you for having me first off. And I started noticing that when I came out of the notch, essentially, and started saying to folk, hey, I've got this book, I'm on contract, it's coming out. And they'd say, oh, is the King of Sweden dit in there? Yeah. Oh, no, it's not. I forgot that one. Is the time that number 3 dropped his flares all over HMS Cardiff on there? So, no, I forgot that. But yeah, and so there is a temptation to maybe put pen back to paper, but because the original was written back in 2010, when everything was real, it was raw, it was live. I don't know if I'd be able to sort of replicate that that spirit, if you like, doing it in retrospect.
No, I can imagine actually, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because here we go. If I get this up here, don't you see this? This is Dartmouth up here. So of course, you and I both went to Dartmouth. It's I didn't go to Cranwell, and I guess you weren't educated at Cranwell, even though I did transfer across. I think one thing I learned through Dartmouth was the Navy is full of great people doing great things, having a great time, but working exceptionally hard. And there will be a lot of things that you could have written in your book. Probably that would have been not the most appropriate for an audience like it is today. So what did you concentrate on when you were? Did you think because I haven't read your book yet, I've read bits pieces from it. Do you start from your early days going to Dartmouth, and you move on from there? Do you going through your flying training on to?
Yeah, and that was a late edition actually, because all I did, the way the book actually came together was it didn't start as a book, Tim. I was away with the French on the Charles de Gaulle in 2010. Yeah. I did like October through 2010 of January 11, and so I was away on a foreign warship. Great people, but I had some time. And you know what? Don't we all? You'll recall it. I'm sure at various happy hours or hungover on a Sunday morning or something, you said, you know what? We should write some of these dits down, because every time we meet, we end up crying with laughter. Someone should write them down. And I thought, well, oh golly, you know what? I've got 4 months away. I'll start just tapping down dits with the classic. I'm not a touch type or anything. So that's what I did, and obviously there's an element of spice added to the fact that halfway through that cruise, the Harrier went out of service. Yeah. So and one chapter that didn't get into the book was it was called "In Place of a Public Inquiry," where I wrote down vitriol about certain decisions, certain people, etc., which was needless. It didn't need to see the light of day. But and there. That's where it was. So 2 years ago, I didn't have a book. I had some of it was in emails that I'd sent back to myself. Some of it was on old hard drives, and I managed to find it all, put it all together when the pandemic came along. And it was only because of a chance encounter between a couple of folk that eventually 2 people, not me, ended up at a barbecue. One of them going, "Do you know anyone who's written a Harrier book?" And the other guy going, I think I do. Gave me a call and said, how's your book? And that was the first of many, many times, Tim, that I had to say, I do not have a Harrier book. I have 22 unrelated dits about buffoonery, bravery, gallantry, complete lunacy. Yeah. And long story short, I got a really great steer from the people at Penguin that basically said, look, this is unsellable at the moment. It would appeal to you, it would appeal to your children, it would appeal to maybe some really deep aviation enthusiasts, but no one else. But if you were to answer your question, if you were to turn it into a why did you join the Royal Navy, just tell us how you got through Dartmouth, how you got through flying training, and then slot these dits in as chapters and then leave at the end, then we've got a book. So that's how it happened.
Yeah, it's what Mandy Hickson, I spoke to her on here as well. She did with her book as well. She did the chronological joining up. I think one of the first women, once she was Joe Slater, and then going through, and of course overcoming failure at every stage, which is a typical trait of all of us, I suppose, isn't it? Really, to a certain extent, we experience failure, then we move on from it. And I think that's what she did with her book. She put some good dits in there, but she kept it in the, why did you join and everything else. And I know why you joined. Of course, it was in the family, like mine, wasn't it? Your father was a Rotary mate, wasn't he? I believe.
Yeah, that's right. And I do tell this story, and there's two stages to this story, and both 100% true. Tim, is that actually the reason I wanted to join the Royal Navy is because I was in the car park by the Royal Air Force Museum when the jets went to corporate. Like my brother and I, like little lemurs, used to cling to the chain wire fence, and nothing. We didn't used to see anything basically. And then one evening in April, there was more noise than normal, and then jet after jet after jet started taxiing past, and they all blasted off on runway 27, turned for Portsmouth. And that night, Dad, who was the OPSO at Yeovilton at the time, came home and said, "Yeah, there's something big cooking off," and
really?
and that was what lit the touch paper. And then there's the and again, I spin this dit in the book, and it's 100% true. You and I and a million other people wanted to fly aeroplanes in the sense that we had a favorite airplane. Mine was the Vigan. Just go with it. But you ended up flying. I ended up flying, and the rest of the million never even applied, which is really sad, I think. But the reason I applied was I read a book once. I was at boarding school, went to Smith's because I had nothing else to do, and saw a picture of, and the caption was, and this is horrible, but go with it for 30 seconds, a family that has been chosen to die sat outside the gas chamber. It was a history book or whatever. And that was the day I filled out the form. I said, you know what? No, I'm going to give it a crack. I'll go and actually do it. But I assumed every step of the way I'd fail. Taunton School has up till me had a 100% failure rate at the pilot aptitude tests. Everyone who went to Biggin Hill spooned it. Yeah. So then it was like here's your train warrant. You're the next in line. Go on, off you go. Go and give it a go. And the guy before me, who failed, he was like a county squash champion or whatever. And I was like, I can't even catch rugby balls, but I'll give it a go.
There was something about that because I failed my A-levels. I can't remember now. I think it was like 2 E's and an N, but that's failure in our terms because we need to be with the A to C, didn't we? Nowadays, well, even back when I transferred to the Air Force, I wasn't eligible academically to be in the Air Force, but because Mike Wigston, the Chief of Air Staff, of course, was the post at the time, and I actually would end up on a squadron with Mike Wigston, so I know him quite reasonably well. They don't look at that once you're in, of course, but the irony being, my background was in that feeling that I was never going to be good enough, and so I didn't do the work I needed to do. It's quite common. I talk about this a lot. I look at failure as first attempt in learning, and I try and empower men, especially men our age. Actually, it's quite interesting. I spoke to a guy the other day who's got a disability, and the way that he talks about himself is limiting his growth because of it. He says, "I have a disability," and I'm trying to reframe that in his mind, saying it's not a disability as far as I'm concerned. It's a visual issue. I'm saying if you keep telling yourself you're disabled and that you're limited, of course you're always going to be. But there seems to be something about people that don't expect to be getting where they get to in the end, and there's almost like a humility then that develops. And we've spoken about, probably a long way around and getting around to this, we've spoken about humility about an hour ago when you were taxing me as I was trying to fly a Harrier to a boat and getting myself completely and utterly mentally drained. But what is that humility then, you think, that people that get to fly these airplanes, where does that come from? Because, and also in addressing that, can we just talk about the ego aspect of piloting, like the necessity to have ego, and the fact, of course, I don't want to keep repeating things we talked about already, but my audience won't have heard this. The fact that single seatmates such as yourself were seen, especially in the Harrier community, were seen to have an ego. Yet I know from a Tornado community that that's not actually true. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think most things to do with these sorts of behaviours, if we call them that, just go with it, are sort of curves, aren't they? So you can be anywhere on the ego curve. It's a bit like aircrew arousal time, isn't it? You're a bit dull, you get in the jet, 2 hours later you're at your peak, 4 hours later. You can actually be performing at any point on that. You can actually fly an aeroplane if you're meek and mild, if you're confident, or if you're arrogant. but arguably the guy who learns the most has the balance between confidence and humility. No one wants someone who isn't confident, particularly when you're in a leadership role, because you're leading, right? And that's where you get this notion of standing, isn't it, Tim? Where who are the good guys on your squadron? Well, him. He doesn't know it, but it's him. And well, what goes into your standing? It's not something you can reach out and touch. It's not something you can measure. You can't buy a litre of standing. But your standing in a community is how good you are, how humble you are, how confident you are, and how you can drag 4, or in your case 7 others, folk through a mission. And right from the get-go, they know that you're the one they want right up the front. So I think there is an obvious tendency for that confidence to at times trip over into arrogance, or to be seen as arrogance. But we've sort of rehearsed saying, is that my belief, the poison of arrogance is because if you assume you're at the top of the mountain, there's nowhere left to go, which means you've stopped learning, which means you don't take on ideas, inputs from other people, and that's not really where you want to be.
No, I completely agree. I think one of the I remember thinking when this young students are coming through on the Hawk T2, which is there it is. They've got a really great balance coming through, these young people. I don't know whether the service, because I training Navy guys and girls as well as Air Force, of course. But I remember thinking, seeing it from an instructor point of view, I think we've got some very, very balanced people coming into flying training or coming into the front line. I'm not saying that we didn't have that when I did, but I just didn't notice it when I was coming through. And I did notice it with the students I was training. And I remember thinking, I'm actually quite privileged to be able to train these young people and to be able to give them something, just a little thing extra to hopefully help them on their way. And now, of course, that's the future of the Air Force, future of the Navy. Maybe it attracts those kind of people. I'm not too sure, but the balance is right there.
See, I had this rather weird balance in my mind looking back, Tim, because I only went to uni because my dad had convinced me that I couldn't be a Sea Harrier pilot.
Right.
That, the uni was there as a safety net because at some point the dream was going to come clattering down. Yeah. And that sort of stuck in my mind, I think. I do remember really clearly driving past Conway to Valley going, well, I've made it to jets. Genuinely, I've made it to jets. I don't know how it happened. This is what grown-ups do. And I had this sort of competing notions in my head. The first was the end will come at some point. It will. But the second was not today. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't happen today. I'm going to, and I even went through a bit of a weird stage at Linton. Have you ever, I'm not comparing myself to the great man at all, but the reason that Mike Tyson used to go running at 3 a.m. was because he knew in his head no one else was running at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
and that was therefore his thing. No one else trains as hard as I do. And I went through a stage at Linton of doing that. I said, the course wasn't going badly, but I was thinking, well, you know what? I only have the one option, and that's single seat. I'm going to work harder than anyone else. So I made it my thing to be working hard late at night. And it was nothing to do with volume of work. It was just because I wanted in my own head to feel, I guess, that I was worth the investment in that was still going on. But I still had that devil and the angel. The devil, you're not going to make it. Angel, not today. You're not going home today.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's something in the men's movements that I work with that says along these lines, and I'll just paraphrasing that, your words are what you say you want to be, whereas your actions are what you actually are. And so I think it's quite interesting to say that. So a guy that is waking up in the morning and he is hitting the streets at 3 a.m., he's doing more than most people are going to do in that day, and he's done it already. And it just gives you that kind of that edge. You don't have to feel like you're, a failure or anything like this, or that you're struggling in the workplace or whatever it might be. Well, you're still going to feel that anyway, but at least you can say, well, I've done something reasonable today. I've actually done something worthwhile. I got out of bed when no one else did, and I went for a run. But no, it's interesting. Do you think this fear of failure, I write about fear of failure and some other things. When I went through flying training, obviously as a naval officer as well, I had that same kind of imposter syndrome. Well, I don't know. I had imposter syndrome. I'm not saying you had imposter syndrome. I had imposter syndrome. I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm here. But that was quite good for me, because I remember thinking, well, it's fine then. Every day is like free, isn't it? If I fail, that doesn't really matter. And maybe that kind of allowed me to relax a bit more.
Yeah, and my mind is quite logical in a way, and I'm quite I don't compartmentalize as in I play on myself. But my view on everything flying training wise was, well golly, how this might sound arrogant, it's meant to. It goes, this is a learnable skill. I'm not a stupid person. I must be able, if I apply myself and learn my checks, to land a hawk, for Christ's sake. It's not witchcraft. And so it's a bit like, I don't know if you recall the first time doing the Dunker, and there would be one or two people out of 30 going into a massive panic. The way my brain works is, there aren't dead bodies on the side of the pool. There was no bus of coffins from yesterday's course going out. Everyone survives this. The STAS works. The instruction's good. Let's just put ourselves through it. It might not be pleasant. I hated the Dunker, particularly later on. You know, the first time at Dunkering, it's a bit like aggressive Boy Scouts. It's good fun, etc., etc. The second time's bad. The third time's really bad. And by now you're 16 years in. I've got far better things to be doing with my life than being in a fake helicopter underwater upside down at night. But that's my viewpoint, is that it is going to work, and so I sort of had this faith that things would work out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember thinking when I left the military, I haven't got to do sea drills again, and it was just going out in Holyhead Harbour, going out there, getting chucked off the back of the boat, doing this starfish, undo your harness, get your little dinghy, blow it up, sit there for an hour, shivering. Big yellow helicopter flies over the top of you, and you're thinking, please don't have an engine failure, have some flyaway speed. And then the low master comes smashing into you, and of course you've got to just let him get your beckets, and you've got to be winched up. And I remember thinking, I'm 43 now, what am I doing this for again? You know what I mean? It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Dunker. I did the Dunker when I first came through. Is it the Drew as well? Is it when you're inside a ship that fills up with water as well? You do that?
Yeah.
Dartmouth? God, that was miserable. I'm glad I didn't have to do that. I didn't realize you guys had a currency on it, to be fair, which is...
4 years, I think it was. And particularly, there was some weird... If you were in the night team, it was shorter. I was in the night team on the FA2 and the GR. So yeah, it was something you couldn't waive.
No, makes sense. We better talk about flying, actually. I'll tell you what I'm going to bring up right now. I'm going to bring up a picture of your book. And I'm going to do that by sharing a screen. Very technical, this. So let me just bring it up. Right, here we go. Penguin, you should better see that now. There we go. Yeah. So Harrier had to be a fighter pilot. Now, it's got some great reviews here. An outstanding first-hand account from inside the cockpit. This is from Johnny Mercer, of course. He's a great guy, isn't he? City puts you in the cockpit for carrier landings, missile firing, some of those intense close air sport stories imaginable. Author of Typhoon. Not as good as Harrier, though. So Typhoon book isn't as good. I've got to say it, haven't we? Because you're on my podcast. I can't go, yeah, it's a good book.
You know what? I love City. City, I think, was a little ways behind me in flying training. And for some reason, we've always got along. He's a great bloke, very humble, actually. And we were texting each other just this morning, etc. And I remember, this has nothing to do with the book, but he was leading a formation once, Tim, when I was sweeping. And they were in Jaguars. And they must have got some sort of indication that the baddies were after them or whatever, like, 20, 30 miles the other side of the hold or something. And they went into this amazing defensive maneuver before even the mission had started. But I get on very well with him. I like his book. It's a different book to mine because his is the perspective of this is me leading a squadron to war with the a vision or view of all the layers of those complexities and the managerial tasks that you might get, whereas mine is more instances of buffoonery and adventure along the way from which you might be able to work out what makes us tick and what we did, if that makes sense.
And I like that, actually. I'm very much into the psychology side of things. So I think when we have a look at the dits and all that kind of stuff, I remember watching a film a long time ago, got introduced to a film, and it was an American doctor talking about US naval pilots. This is going back in the 80s now. It's a classic, The Failing Aviator, in fact. And it was very interesting to hear him say, look, you're all the same. You all shave the same way in the morning. And it was like, civilians, I don't know how they're not dead when they shave. And they all do it completely different. And you think, no, we're not the same. We're not the same. But when you think about it, of course, we kind of are. We're all on that. We self-select, don't we? So you say, I want to fly airplanes or helicopters. Yeah, I want to do it. And then you present yourself at the careers office, and the careers officer says, okay, let me check you out. Yeah, you're kind of the same as us. And they get you in. And then, of course, from that moment forward, we're in this conformist, hierarchical, meritocratic organization and throwing airplanes at us. But it's an interesting one that you both write books, and they're actually different. In a way, they complement each other. I think that's quite a good way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, and you're absolutely right about, and that's deadly, by the way. The self-selecting point. There were a couple of fatal accidents I remember when I was on the Sea Harrier, not on the Sea Harrier Force, and there's a natural reaction in the crew room to say, "Oh, have you read the accident report? You wouldn't believe what that bunch of clowns, blah blah blah, were doing." And you go, "Hang on a minute, mate. If that had been about us, we'd have been hit for every single one of those points. We're exactly the same. We're a
Yeah.
small, self-selecting, self-policing." Community. It was actually the height of professionalism almost to keep ourselves on the rail, if you like.
Well, absolutely. And this is I don't want to talk too political about the Air Force or anything like that. I mean, I've hit them recently with some emails that we came out and all sorts of things. And I want to kind of hold a mirror up sometimes, because I think, let's not get too into it, but we just like the Air Force to be an Air Force, and not to follow sort of populist culture. But with the latest news of the Reds, a couple of the Reds being sent back from their training camp at Springhawk, and I'm going to do a whole podcast on this myself. But it made me realise that could have been me, and I'm honest about it. You know, what I'm saying I could have been. It seems to be alcohol related. I think all of us can put our hand up and say, you know what, there were times when we probably took it too far in the evening and then crawled into the jets. I remember when I came through though, and there were some good people that trained me in the Navy, and one of them, Jamie's up there still at Valley, and you probably know who he is. I remember the policy being, it's a work hard, play hard policy, and that I think held us in good stead to be able to go out to things like Flag, where you're debriefing late and it's long, and you got to get up in the morning, you got to do the same thing again, you got to get to your jets. I think that's something that's probably intrinsic within individuals that do join, and then it just manifests itself, because we're all the same people, into expecting that from each other. I'm not overly convinced though that it's healthy, especially when you leave, because I still have some of that's having to get things done and having to move, and not necessarily being totally confident in myself that I'm actually going to be able to get them done. Do you think that comes out of a sense of maybe we're controllers, and all pilots tend to be having to be in control of something, and maybe when we come outside, there's a bit of chaos out here and we're kind of a little bit lost? And do you get that?
I don't know. My 2 points. My children, bless them, always have a go at me about why does it need to be done now.
Right.
I'm a very much no. It does need to be done now, because and the way you and I were trained to think was, you get things out of the way, don't we?
Yeah.
And the answer that I give back in a very sort of Victorian dad Hessian underpants type sort of way is because every job is only useful for a certain amount of time, and if you don't get it cracked, blah, that's the way we think. That it's only useful to do this activity now, and there will come a point where it is either too late or not useful. But to the work hard, play hard point, I think that there is I absolutely agree with the need or the desirability of a work hard, play hard thing, but there is a tendency amongst certain people to forget exactly what that means. And you occasionally would hear people, oh, he likes to work hard, play hard. You go, no, he doesn't. He likes to play hard, and he's a clown. Work hard, play hard only works if you do work hard, you know your stuff, and you're there the next day at the push. The play hard is very much the second part of that phrase, and that's the only way it works.
No, I am. Well, I spent a lot of time down at Yeoverton. I remember at the time I was going through as a student, it was there was this term of being gash, wasn't there? And I remember it was whether it was in the Sea Harrier community, there was a thing in the early days. I don't know whether you were there at the time, to be fair. I remember someone saying, look, you've got to be good to be gash. And that was quite interesting. It's like, when you're good, you can then take shortcuts. I mean, we were in flying training, and of course we all wanted to be gash. We had our sleeves rolled up here, you know, the flight suit open, and trying to emulate all the Sea Harrier mates when we were young students. And the Sea Harrier mates were saying, no, you've got to be good first.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah, then you can cut corners, but be good first. Get some hours in, get some years behind the jet, and then you can cut corners a little bit. But at the time, you know, do your check sort of thing, that sort of thing. When you went obviously from the Sea Harrier, it was I was walking up the hill, in fact, with John Eggin, who was later killed in the Reds. Walking up Snowdon with him, because I did his, before he went to the Reds, I did his, where they come to Valley, and we let them do some loops and some barrel rolls to help them out with their selection. Obviously got in the team, and we walked up Snowdon together. And he was furious that the Harrier was going. When was this then? This is 2010, must have been.
2010 was when the decision was made, and it was pretty schnell. So flying was done by the end of 2010.
Because that's right. And I went to Afghanistan early 2011, and then John was killed later 2011. In fact, that was on his first tour. But I remember saying to him, look, everyone is upset about the Harrier going, because the Sea Harrier went in 2003, I believe it was, because before I was about
6.
Oh yes, it did. It did. That's a very good point, actually. Was it 6? I started flying training about 2003, so it must have been 6, because I was one of the about 9 guys who were in flying training at the time when it went, and so Mike Wigston called us all up and said, if you want to transfer and carry on flying, then we can put you onto an Air Force slot. And of course, I went Tornado, please, because my ground attack was a lot better than my air defense was ever going to be, believe me. So it can suit me quite well, and I got a navigator for free. Check that out. But you never got one of those, did you? So
no, but I've never really regretted that.
I have to carry my own bags, that's for sure. You know, it's nice to chat to someone when you got to go sausage side. But when the Harrier went, the Aviate-B, so GR7, GR9 went, John was fuming. I remember saying to him as we walk up this hill, look, we're fuming as well, mate. Don't get me wrong. You know, GR mates are as upset. Everyone in the community, everyone in the flying community is upset. No one wants to see the Harrier go because he said it should be Tornado. It's like, well, Cameron said that he was only going to get rid of the aircraft that wasn't in conflict at the time, if I remember correctly. And the Tornado was in Afghan. Was it Afghan? Yeah, it was. And the Harrier had come back from it, hadn't it, at the time? So he had to get rid of one of them. But yeah, no one wanted to see that go. And then, of course, we pushed them across to the USMC. Talking of USMC, you did an exchange on the F-18 was it post Harrier?
Yeah, indeed.
Was that USMC or US Navy then?
Navy. I went to the Pacific Strike Wing in Lemoore in California.
Lemoore, yeah. I got a guy out there. I think he's back now, to be fair. Is that very different from our Navy in many ways?
Not in many ways. There are so many things that are common. You know, if you're used to landing on ships, there's an awful lot that is common. You know, finding ships at sea is tricky, landing on ships at sea, but getting yourself in good order is largely the same, whether or not you plan to be below a certain weight because you plan to hover, or you plan to be below a certain weight at a certain time so you can come and stick a hook on a wire. So that's largely similar. An awful lot of the tactics were understandable, if you see what I mean, in that you're never going to do an air-to-air engagement exactly like we did in the Sea Harrier, but you'd get where they were coming from. And actually you'd be able to tweak it occasionally if you saw what they were doing and could make a minor improvement. So for example, I remember having not an argument, a spirited discussion with a US Navy guy about when we should abort on an air-to-air sortie, and me going, well, I know how you've done your maths, and I know I've got another X miles or X seconds, and I wanted that shot to stick. So I'm not just mucking around with your tactics. I've taken the knowledge I have, the knowledge of your tactics, and I'm now doing something sensible. So I'm not blowing you off. I'm here to learn, but there are little tweaks I can make. Same with the air to surface stuff from the Harrier. And in the Super Hornet at the Lot 33, which I was lucky enough to fly, then it could do just about anything. So it was a really, really good jet.
I remember you saying that. So that Super Hornet, you can carry 10 AMRAAM or something and 2 AIM 9Xs, can't you? And so
you're not going to run out.
I remember you saying they haven't got to count anymore. I remember thinking that'd be great. That would be just superb. Just throw rockets around without counting. So because you've done both disciplines, of course. When I remember speaking to a Harrier mate and saying, well, I flew some backseat Harrier stuff actually when some guys came up to Valley, and that I remember the jet slowing down over the fence at Valley, me in the back going, this is wrong. You know, this feels wrong, because it was very early days, first thing I've ever done. But it's great to be able to hover in the Harrier and go, yeah, that was crazy. I remember Harrier mates saying they'd love to do night TFR in the Tornado or MVG and stuff like this. And I remember the great thing about all these different jets, all do different things. And there's things I'd really want to do in all the different jets. And it's quite interesting, that, isn't it? There's things you always want to do in different airplanes. It's like when we did the thing a minute ago, people don't realize, but what I did with Paul here is I ran the flight school, had some of my guys up, and we got Paul to talk us through some more nuanced element of flying the Aviate-B, which is Harrier 2, of course, very similar to the GR7, GR9. And I'm getting maxed out as I come to the ship. And I remember thinking and saying to Paul, I wouldn't want to do this at night. That's just me. Hands up to it. I expect most Harrier mates didn't want to do that at night. Am I right?
At this point, you probably just want to bring the nose up and just you'll stop yourself, I would imagine. Perfect.
What happens if you crash?
Yeah, and you used to have to do a fair amount before you were allowed to. So in the Sea Harrier, which I did my initial night qual and full night qual in the Sea Harrier. The initial night qual being I can land on a boat at night. I think we had to have 70 deck landings under our belt before we even tried it. That was impossible in the GR because folk, I don't know, but I'd probably stake a pint on the fact that most deck landings, someone within a Royal Air Force or indeed Royal Navy full up GR squadron when we were supporting Afghanistan, they probably only got 30 or 40 deck landings, and that was considered very experienced. Whereas I topped out closer to 200 or so. But when you move on to the full night qual, you're doing it at the back end of a tactical sortie. And guess what? All your tracking juice has gone because you've just used it in that tactical sortie. So it won't surprise you that both me and my buddy, we went through the Air Warfare Instructors course together. So hopefully relatively good operators. I remember the first trip after initial night qual, and we went up for our first tactical ride. And I ended up in some massive falling leaf maneuver getting back onto the deck, and he ended up in a very low hover over the deck, which we were talking about earlier, re-ingested, and there was a pop surge. So behind me, there was this poof of light. That's no accident. That's because your brain has been working for an hour and a half and hasn't just been doing the instrument pattern. So it shouldn't have surprised anyone when it happened, but that's that. So you always wanted to be part of the night team because it made you special. And in a bar over far too many beers, someone like myself, if you wanted to annoy the younger guys, you might say, "Oh, come on, let's be honest. Unless you've landed it on the deck at night, you haven't landed it." That sort of thing. But there was a prestige to being part of the night team. It was hard work, and after any detachment at sea, the last time you're climbing out of your immersion suit or putting your goggles away or something like that, you'd all look at each other, the four ship, because it would only ever be a four ship on any unit. Only four of you would have the pre-quals and the quals to go flying. Someone would say, "Well, thank God that's over. I don't have to do that again for another 8 weeks or whatever it is."
It's exactly the same thing. I completely understand. There was a buddy of mine. He went F-15s in the end, actually, after Tornado on exchange. But we thought that we were better than we were on the front line Tornado. So I think it was under Mike Wixon. I think he was the boss at the time. And so he went to Mike and we said, "Mike, can we do our MVG workup?" Which is on Tornado GR. Of course, it was a low-level MVG workup. And he said, "Oh, I don't think so. You've only been on the squadron for a couple of years. Maybe give it a bit longer." We said, "No, we're ready for it." And so we both got put on it. And after the first flight, we both came back and went, "I don't want to do that anymore." That's the scariest thing in the world. What is going on with that? Like putting tornadoes down valleys at 250 feet around Scotland. Look, you've got the Fleur up there. You've got MVGs around here. And it's just, and roads are going above you and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's epic to think that, you can do that, especially in the UK. I'm a very lucky person to be night MVG qualled. And obviously you've got to put the jet on TFR and everything else. But it was hard. That sort of thing's hard. And you come off it, don't you? You think, yeah, I'm glad. You don't sleep that night, by the way. You don't, I can imagine. You've got to lie there like this. Wait till the morning comes up. It must be horrific.
Which is why I say in whenever we get onto this subject, I always say anyone that builds an aircraft carrier without a bar is a psychopath. That is just utterly ridiculous.
But that's it, though. That's the problem now, isn't it? That's what we're going into again. We're going into this. It's a difficult one because I think we're seeing less alcohol use in the military than maybe there was during our time, and we could argue that's a positive. But I would also argue that we've lost a lot. We've lost a lot from the decompression, going to the bar, the debrief. The Valley was especially good for that. And Linton Lees as well, going through flying training. People would finish, they'd go to the bar, they'd have a few beers, go to dinner, come back out again, go and do some studying in the room, maybe come down for a last pint, and then go. And that's how it used to be. There's a lot of learning, isn't there, done in the bar, but we're not seeing that anymore. The sensible Tim would say that's a good thing, but the kind of more rational Tim would say, actually, I think we've lost a significant amount by not encouraging that kind of thing. Isn't it awful? There's no right.
I agree. There is that. Bonding and learning, just learning through sea stories. You're not going to get everything out in the debrief, are you? But I do recall when I went back to Valley to hoof off a 9 Mike when I was on the Sea Harrier, and this was after something had happened. I think it was the Pickering crash, where people were now actually there was a limit, and I think it was 2 pints or something. So anyway, we hoof off this 9 Mike, splashed Jindervik. We missed the Jindervik, got the flares. Luckily, the one before splashed the Jindervik, but. Went to the bar and bought a couple of beers, went back for a third, and the barman said, sorry, you've had 2 pints. So we're like, So yes, and my boss and I, there, Commander Royal Navy, and not being uppity about it, but it's quite odd for a Commander Royal Navy to have to be asking a barman why am I not allowed more than 2 pints of beer?
There is that,
because I'm not allowed to serve anyone more. My boss's reply was, "Well, how the hell does anyone pass flying training?" That was his historical view as to how he'd got through. But
yeah, exactly.
you know what? It goes back to the old work hard, play hard thing, though, doesn't it? I think there were things that we are probably better off without, but we have lost a bit. I think you're right.
Yeah, we lost a bit, and I think it's a changing service. And I must admit now, when I don't have a go at the service, I said in one of the last videos I did, I'm very proud that I've got naval wings and Air Force wings, and most, the majority of people don't have that. I think there's fewer fast jet mates in the country than there are Premiership footballers, so it's a very rare thing to have done, and for people to still do. So I don't bring them down. I just think sometimes, in fact, I've seen a resurgence in the United States Air Force, interestingly enough, with their latest advert is full on military. It's got jets flying around, it's got the voiceover, and they've sort of gone back in, I think, to saying, hang on a second, we've dabbled with this progressive populist culture, and we're not going to be doing that anymore. I'm not saying that's what's happening in the service. Of course, it is a little bit. I don't see it happening so much in the Navy, but I think we just got to be careful that we make sure our military is fully military, which is a bit of a rant for me. I was going to ask you, actually, having done both, so ground attack and air to air, when I was teaching air to air at Valley, I wasn't a massive fan. And what I mean by that is I preferred the planning and the execution of the low level or the medium to low level air to ground. Did you have a preference, though? I know it might be a community-based preference for you, of course, because you might go, yeah, flying around with, purely fleet air arm and stuff, and no Air Force mates was brilliant. But is there a preference? And what is that preference based on also? It can't be, I liked flying at low level. It has to be something tangible.
I think there's an element of the scientists and the artists and the definites and the nuance to be, Tim, right. I'd say. Well, because you'll know that actually you and I could go and fly an air defense mission right now. We don't have to plan. You'd be in battle port. Yes, we'd have to agree on a frequency. And apart from that, it would just be a case of fight what you see, either by SOP or making sensible decisions based on what we know. That suits some minds. It suits some people. And then guess what? When we come down, we'd be still looking at the tapes probably at some point tomorrow, trying to work out who blah, 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 blah. And the reverse is true of the air to surface world, which is actually, if you want to spend 2 hours moving waypoints a couple of inches, blah, 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 but know exactly where you're going to be, where on track on time is. Yeah, I get it. You're going to be off track. It's going to be bounced, weather, fuel, etc. But it's a more definite plan, and you get a very definite, did you achieve weapons on time, on target, or not? So I think that's the preference. The reason I liked air defense is because you fight against fighter pilots. And that means that the guy across the way, if you're in a Sea Harrier, is probably as clever as you, probably as well trained as you, and probably has a better machine. And arguably, we might have a better radar or a better weapon, but that doesn't really matter. The fact is that I've got to outwit Tim. It's not a SAM operator. It's not the clock. It's not the weather, because I can fight in all weathers. I can fight in the dark. I've got to outwit Tim, and I've got to construct my kill chain on you before you do the same on me. Yeah. And that's why I enjoy air defense. What I took out of it anyway.
No, and I completely agree with that, actually. And that's what I teach the guys in the flight school now. I said, you're fighting the man in the cockpit, or the woman, of course. What I mean by that is you're fighting a human in the cockpit. You're just trying to get them off their timeline. That's all you're doing. Whatever you do, if you can get them behind timeline and stay on yours, you're going to win that engagement. And also, I do talk about the necessity of mid-abort range, going out by MAR, and snipping missiles as well. Sometimes you've got to trash a shot in order to get saved. You don't have a choice. And we try to work out, because we go through timelines, we're saying, so how can we exploit this a little bit more? How can we push MAR a little bit, yet still remain safe? And we have those conversations. And that is interesting to me. That is very much an airborne chess. I was an electronic warfare instructor on the GR. So for me, a lot of it, the SAMs were what I was interested in, the doctrine, the SAM operated doctrine, which country we're looking at, what training have these guys had, and how good are they? Sort of thing, what are we doing with these things? And you go to flag and you fight against them. I used to love it. I used to love getting illuminated. I had another EY in the back. I was quite fortunate. So 2 EYs going into Spade Adam, low level. I tell you what, we had 2 EYs in my airplane. We had 2 QIs in the other. I remember the sortie. I'm not going to nick your dits here at all, but we didn't get shot down and they did. Because a QI is going to go and press and hit the target because that's what a QI is interested in. I fully understand that, but an EY is interested in the systems we're going up against. And so I'm going in against certain systems, and our jet's doing something different to their jet because we understand the way the operators at Spade Adam were going to use their surface-to-air missile systems against us. So I think you're exactly the same. I can geek out on EW stuff all day, and I hate it. I'm sure you could geek out on all the AW stuff.
I think it's all much muchness. I was part of a great squadron in the US Navy, and lucky enough, in one sim, it was in the sim. And this all for obvious reasons. I'm just about to say, when you look at how we're going to defeat this SAM today, and I said, it's a pretty fruity one, but that min engagement altitude, 87 feet, we can crack this. We just need to be at 50 feet. We're going to do it, and we're going to do what? We're going to fly at 50 feet. We're doing it, and all the sim instructors looking at us going, "What the hell are you guys planning to do?"
Brilliant.
Watch this. That's the chink in their armor, and we're going through it. We're going on under it, and it worked. And it was nice to have that faith in it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it could never have worked with peacetime training rules. But what would you have done on the day of the races? That's the only way you're going to get through.
I don't know what you're doing now, Paul. You don't have to tell me at all. Are you in a business sort of context now, where you're in an office, management, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I work for a defence firm. It's sales essentially.
Yeah, fine. So what I miss being like an instructor or a mate on a squadron, I'm wondering whether you miss this as well, is that when there is an issue that comes up, you've got a lot of clever people there, and we tend to walk in a room, get a whiteboard out, and we try and solve it all together. And you're not trying to outdo anyone. You're not trying to find out who's right and who's wrong. You're trying to find out what is right and what is wrong. So, you might see a flight tape. I did see a flight tape actually from Valley. Someone sent me something. I get sent stuff all the time. I don't publish it, of course, but mates will send you stuff. And it was of a very nasty incident of Valley on the T2. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know why that's happened, and I've never had that before. I can normally work it out, or people. I remember thinking, and the guy sent it to me, said, we can't work out why it's happened, and so, but I don't know. And so they all got together, they all got into a room, they all got the flight tape out, the pilot and everything, and within half a day or whatever, they'd worked out what had happened with the aeroplane, and it was, I missed that, the fact that I don't have that at the moment. I can't go into a room with like-minded people and whiteboard stuff up and solve the thing. And that was a real that was something about the service I felt was quite special. You could support each other and solve a problem. Is that something that you carry through now into the business world?
Yeah, occasionally. And I'm a bit of a stickler, to be honest, in the business world. You can imagine, can't you, when you do get people together and you notice everyone's got one of these and everyone's got their laptops open. There's no point having a meeting if you're not engaged. We're here to brainstorm a problem. And if your emails are really that important, bearing in mind that industry and defence in particular work at some sort of policing pace, and there's nothing going to happen in the next 30 minutes to an hour that's actually needs that. That's one thing. Yeah, the one thing I've noticed, which is interesting, is the only concept that I struggled with when I joined industry was risk, budgets, likelihood of capture, those sort of things. It's all very simple. It's all mathematical. The bit I didn't get, and to this day I don't get it, is when you don't actually pursue an opportunity. The idea that actually we've had a look at it, there's someone else that's a bit stronger over here, someone else a bit stronger over here, our chances of getting it's only 30%, we're not going to do it, and let's go and put our resource somewhere else. That's really hard for someone who's gone through their entire career, particularly in the aeroplanes I flew, going, no, we're still going to beat them. We're not scared. We just need to find a way of getting them down into block one. And as soon as they do, they're in real trouble. So the notion that you're going to go, no, early doors, going to walk away. Well, surely we press. Surely at least we see what their opening gambit is, and then we go. Yeah. So what we would call the no bid situation is the only one I really struggle with.
You may have to look at the resources that they're trying to bid with, and in resources being in a human term, they may think they don't have the strength to bid on that particular one, and another one that they may feel is easier. But we've all been in those conversations in industry, I think, where we've kind of gone, no, we just have to just look at being better, present something better. That's all we got to do. Or highlight what the other people aren't better. Maybe that's the thing, though, isn't it? I think risk is one of those things that we have to look at differently when we come out. Did you, when you came out? Oh, sorry, I was going to ask, when you came out, did you come out? Was your transition okay? Was it like just straight out into industry? You're fine, you're done, or did you come out and think, like you're just saying there? I think you're saying there, this is all a bit chaosy in comparison to what
No,
you're
I
doing?
know it was all very straightforward, to be honest, and I know, and I don't want to make light of it because I know some people do struggle to adjust.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my last two proper jobs were on the F-35 capability management and in MOD doing weapon management.
Yeah.
And so I went to work in a suit. I worked in defence procurement, and guess what? One day you're walking in through main building, show someone your pass, blah. Next day you're going into another building in a suit, showing someone your pass, and yes, there are different new people, new lexicon, but I found it very, very straightforward, to be honest. And I no issue whatsoever. And in fact, I would agree with a couple of people did actually tell me at the time that the career transition partnership and their courses were probably the best delivered package I had in the military. You know, the bit where the training was actually fit for purpose, delivered on time, and you got what you wanted from it. So yeah, no complaints at all from me with transition.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. How long do you do in them? I don't know how long you're in for.
Well, in the Royal Navy, I did 20 years.
21 years. I did 20 and left after that. Yeah, I found it a bit chaotic, to be fair. But then again, we had a big move as well. I think, did you stay in the same area then?
Yeah,
Fine. Yeah, we had a huge move. I just found it very, people didn't do what, people would tell you they're going to do something and then they didn't do it. And I'd never seen that before. We'd never seen that. If someone said they were going to do something, then it would get done. And it would normally get done that day, to be fair, if they possibly could. And out here, it just didn't happen that way. And I found that very destabilizing. It took me a couple of years to go, all right, so that's how it's going to be. We're going to say we do stuff, but we're not necessarily going to do it. And everyone's cool with that. Everyone happy. Let's move on then. We're fine. But that's probably, depending on who you work with and things like that, isn't it? So have you got more books in you, or is that's your sole thing? Are you going to become a prolific writer and win bestsellers?
Well, no, not a prolific writer. I think there might be more dits to be, like I was saying at the beginning, the amount of reminders that you get, and the sort of 8 chapters of ones I couldn't find.
Yeah.
So like that, and some of them are really quite funny, as opposed to anything extraordinary by feats of arms or daring do or whatever. But it's not something that I've set out to do. We'll have to see. It would take a lot of time, and
yeah.
I have a job, so I don't have a lot of time.
God, tell me about that. Interestingly, within the Navy, Ewan Kelby was on a ship I was in when I was on fleet time. I don't know whether he was slightly before your time. He was ex-Harrier mate, and he decided to go driving ships. After that, completely lost track of him, don't know where he went. But that was a common road for aviators. Aviators could stop flying and go and drive ships. I thought that was great that the Navy offered that. I don't know when you had to do it. I think you had to make a decision after maybe a second tour or something, else you were staying flying. Was that ever something that you thought of doing and staying in the Navy and progressing long term and trying to rank up and everything and taking a ship drive? Or
no, and this is probably the bone of contention that drove me from the service in the end, not in a tantrum sort of way. But no. Ewan was actually my next door neighbour, so I know Ewan very well. Lovely man. But so, by and large, people like Ewan had actually joined the general list, had become officers of the watch on board a ship, and they'd then sub-specialised as a pilot. So then they were jumping between career paths, which would go maybe frigate XO, squadron drive, staff tour, frigate drive as a commanding officer. Yeah. And I was told at the end of my first tour that I really ought to, someone like me, and the boss was being cool. He's like the cut of your jib, like what you're doing, but if you want to progress in this man's Navy, you are going to have to command a ship, and the only way of doing that is to go now, get your bridge watchkeeping certificate, and then on your second tour, maybe go and do a more maritime job, etc. And I wanted to go on the AY course, and I just had the wrong crypto load in for it, to be honest, Tim. My view was that I want to be as good as I can possibly be at flying aeroplanes, and you're not going to be that if you go and spend 2 years doing 6-minute fixes on the bridge of a warship. So no, I'm not interested. And I actually felt over the years that I was correct in that, and it really disappointed me after 2010. There was a bit of inter-service nonsense, and whether it's true or not, the perception in Navy Command was that the Royal Air Force was up to something, as they always are. They were up to some sort of land grab, and the only way of preserving the fixed-wing fleet air arm was to get back to sea and do sea jobs. And I just thought it was just the most intellectually stunted argument ever. And I was so to be a squadron commander or to be the commander air of a warship, I need to now go to sea to navigate a warship at 6 minute miles or whatever it is, 6 knots. I actually have a USP myself. I've got the most deck landings of anyone in the fixed wing community. I have spent my entire career flying in and out of fleets. No one else can do that. I've been night qualled, FA2 GR9. No one else can do that. I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet. I'm just saying I've got to a point where I think I should be able to compete for these jobs. And you've just written job descriptions which I don't qualify for, which I just simply don't understand. So there is an element of that. And I've sort of mellowed my opinion as you do with time, and maybe they had a point. But you know what? People rely on experts, don't they? If there's no way, commander air of a warship, if something's going wrong with an F-35B, he's not going to say, guys, leave this to me, I know everything. He's going to turn to the F-35B landing signals officer and say, what do you want me to do? Yeah. Equally, if someone calls up from the ops room and said, hey, mate, there's a submarine threat, we need to turn left. You don't need to have seen that 1,000 times to understand that the ship's going to turn left. So I thought myself that the ability to jump between the maritime and aviation was probably stopping people becoming experts at air warfare, and I wanted to be an air warfare expert, and that sort of led me into a bit of a cul-de-sac at the end of the day. No hard feelings. It's the Royal Navy's train sets, their rules of the game, but that's essentially how I felt.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, a general is a generalist, of course. I mean, a general. This is the thing, isn't it? I suppose that's what they're trying to get, is someone that has a bit of experience all over the place. And when they get to the top, they can appreciate that. I do remember you saying something about, I think, being a story that you told, or you'd heard, that in the Falklands, the ship's captain was talking about which fuse setting to put on the bomb.
Yeah. And again, he wasn't doing it to try and do a bad job, but it was. It's in one of the books about the Falklands. It can't be Sharkey's book because it was the other captain. It was Lynn Middleton. I think it may be Jerry Pook's book, which and then he has some frank views on the Royal Navy and how the air war was run down there from the GR3 perspective. Right. I think it's probably in that book that the captain's picking fuse settings for weapons. Maybe not.
Well, it's kind of ballsy, isn't it? It's kind of like. Yeah, fair enough. Well, I understand that. That was a common thing, though, when I was going through flying train. That was a common thing. That was, are you going to stay flying, or are you going to go into, surface warfare or something? And that's, I think we were always told that was how your career was going to progress if you wanted to progress your career. And all of us at the time, of course, were thinking, what's the point of me doing all this training on the jet and getting good on the jet if I've got to then go and do that training on ships? Like, just because, why can't we have people that know what they're doing on ships and people that know what they're doing on jets and all come together in the end? But
and Tim, there's one reason why this is one big shining lie, by the way, because, and I never got this far, I never made it up the I got to commander, but not above anywhere else on the totem pole.
Yeah.
At captain and 1-star, you start competing for joint jobs, and the Royal Navy will say, well, to get to that stage, you have to command a warship. And you go, but I'm competing against Royal Air Force people and British Army people. They've never commanded a warship. So what is it that you're actually funneling me through? Maybe I'm being a little bit flippant at that point, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I think it's they look at everyone that's going to go into the 1-star or the air ranks, which is why I call the air ranks, as potentially, of course, can be the first Sea Lord, don't they? And the first Sea Lord, they always want the first Sea Lord to have driven a ship. I mean, to me, that kind of makes sense, but there is that transitional barrier, and I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, everything becomes a bit joint, doesn't it? I don't know whether we still have that inter-service rivalry anymore, do we? I suppose we do in certain areas, but does it exist, those top levels now? Or we got
I hope not. Because I was at Air Command, one group for my lieutenant commander's job. Yeah. And there was a little bit of time where it got a bit poisonous, relationships between Naval Command, one group, Air Command in general, about jets on boats, etc. And I was sort of in the thick of it because I could see it from the other perspective. Well, you can't have a jet on a boat if it's needed in Afghanistan. That's probably the priority right now. And I remember my oppo down at Fleet, a Royal Air Force guy in Fleet Command. He, for example, would tell horror stories about things he was told to do or say or just not be there when, for example, the carriers went through main gate. So it has been pretty poisonous in the past, but my experience, Joint Force Harrier, we just got on with it, right? Yeah. And the inter-service nonsense was essentially limited to midshipmen, pilot officers, and second lieutenants in the Army Air Corps who would argue about stuff in the bar they didn't understand at Cranwell, and I was probably one of those at some point. And then the other people that seemed to argue about it were all the really senior officers and politicians, and then everyone in the middle just got on. You know, Joint Force Harrier, we just delivered, and it didn't matter whether you were on a Royal Air Force squadron, Royal Navy squadron, or and there was obviously a smattering of other people between them. It was just, that doesn't matter. We were almost, there was a, let's call it a nonsense umbrella over the top of it. Occasionally things would get through, like we were actually deployed when there was a picture of the then CAS. Won't add to the story to tell you which one, but he was sat there, obviously an MOD, but in a desert coverall with a typhoon on the desk saying, "One nation, one Air Force." And we're like, yeah, I get it, sir, but we're in your chain of command and we're actually at war. You know, could we not have done this in 6 weeks' time when we were home? That was peculiar. But I sensed, Tim, that we're past that now. I sense, particularly with the leadership, and you've mentioned Sir Mike already, but Sir Mike, and that we've got some really good people up the top of the militaries at the moment, particularly the dark and light blue, and I think they're doing a damn good job. You know, you hear particularly the Royal Air Force support for the Carrier Strike Group 21, etc., and what they achieved. So I think hopefully we're through that. I think your observation is correct, and we're through that age. Probably have been for a couple of years now, to be honest. Just for
the tape, because you just broke up just at the point you said the Royal Air Force support for that bit I missed.
The Carrier Strike Group, the 21. You know, if things had gone on the way they were when I was a lieutenant commander, there's no way that you would have got Deputy Commander Operations and the Chief of the Air Staff saying, "Look how good this is. We've got joint units on a strategic platform, giving strategic reach to the Far East. What could be better?" That could never have happened unless those senior leaders in the Royal Air Force and Royal Navy had bought in. And I think there are some really strong personal connections there as well. You see them talking, and they're obviously very friendly.
Yeah, that's what I get from it as well. I mean, Mike Wixton, as I said, I probably should be calling him Sir Mike. That's a very good nudge, by the way. You know, I knew him when obviously he was my boss as I left the GRs, and yeah, I mean, I think his heart's in the right place. I think that at the top now he's trying to do what he thinks is right, and in some cultural elements I think that might not be the case, but I think we're quite lucky to have all our service heads at the moment very much what I would consider to be unified. I don't remember that being the case in my early years in the service. I don't remember that being the case at all. Maybe it is things, you know, the Carrier Strike Group, Joint Force Harrier, Joint Helicopter Command, all these kind of things have brought people together a lot more because they have to be together, and there you realize actually we're all the same, just, you know, we made the mistake of joining the Navy, and they made the mistake of doing something else. Yeah. You know, it's just what the mistake is. We end up in a different colour uniform, and it's pathetic to say otherwise. But no, I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So just to round off then, because we've done 57 minutes, and I don't want to keep you, because for people watching, this is a Sunday evening. You're not necessarily. With your book, obviously you're doing a lot of these podcasts and you're doing these. I hope you've spoken about something that isn't necessarily from the book, because I don't want people to come on here and talk about the book necessarily, because people can read the book and this kind of thing. Where can they find either yourself, obviously here, but where can they find yourself or the book? Is it bought through Amazon, or it's written by Penguin, isn't it? So where can they reach out and grab that?
Well, depending on when they view this, obviously it's a historical document. As we talk today, then the path of least resistance is to look on Amazon. I actually quite like a little relationship I've got, Tim, with my local bookshop, the Marlow Bookshop, or just Marlow Bookshop.
Okay.
They've agreed that if anyone wants a personalised copy and they get an order, they'll give me a ring and I'll go down and sign it for them through there. That's a nice way of me supporting a local business, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the book reacts very well to a Google Harrier how to be a fighter pilot. And I only inhabit Twitter and I'm Paul_Tremelling. So if anyone wants to engage, ask any questions or whatever, then it's not a particularly good disguise, is it? I'm there.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm just Tim Davies _UK, I think it is. Yeah, I don't hide behind a pseudonym. Well, that's really nice that you have that local relationship with the bookshop. I'm a big fan of that, actually. So someone just phones them up and says, "I'd like Paul's book," and they give you a call or give you a batch of them, and you go and sign them, and then they get a signed copy.
Yeah, exactly that. So on the just like you leave delivery instructions, if you order a book through their website, Marlow Bookshop, in the comments box, if you fill in, "Could I please have this one signed saying, Dear David, best of luck at university," or whatever, then I can go down and and sign it. It'll add a day to proceedings, but nothing more.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's great that you do that. It's brilliant that you do that. I think that's some great knowledge. I'll try and put that in one of the top comments on this video. That's going to cost you some time, though, isn't it? But what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? You have to go sign your book. I'll make that a pinned comment. But look, thank you for coming on here. I really appreciate your time. It's brilliant that you can bring the knowledge that you do to the community, really, which, as my flight school is trying to be a bit of an aviation university, trying to motivate people to do something positive with their life and actually something purposeful. So thank you for coming on. It's very kind, and I wish you all the best with the book in future.
Thank you very much for having me, Tim. Thank you.